name is Elizabeth Morton, but my friends have always called me Lizzie. I was born in the spring of 1899, a time which I've been told the expectations for the future were extremely high. The world was filled with new modern inventions. Things were changing so quickly. Cars, telephones, airplanes made life so easy and the world so much closer. The first 10 years of my life were constantly filled with amazing wonder. I first heard stories about how the Wright brothers were able to make machines fly in December of 1903. Ford started mass-producing the Model T in 1908. My father told me they called it Tin Lizzie because of me. I didn't really believe him, but I told that story to all my friends anyway. Huge steamships were built, the size of floating cities. But not all these wondrous things met with success. The Titanic never completed its first journey across the Atlantic. My mother thought of herself as a thoroughly modern woman. She always followed the latest fashions. I remember when she started wearing jackets on her dresses and felt positively scandalous doing so. But there were some customs that weren't quite so easily forgotten. I still had to help her into her corset every morning, and she even made me wear one. All my memories of those early days are so happy and carefree. But then, when I turned 18, things got very serious. The U.S. declared war on Germany and entered the Great War. All the girls my age had to serve our country. I got a job working in a factory at first, and later a better job as a secretary for the city council. My mother was so proud of me. Women of her generation had never dreamt of doing work like this. She had long been an avid supporter of the suffragettes, and I remember her joy on that day in 1915 when the House of Representatives passed the suffrage bill. I also remember how bitter and disappointed she was when the Senate later ruled against it. Boy, she was fuming. After the war was won, the party started. I was 20 years old and ready for everything. The 1920s were fast and affluent. Cars, airplanes, music, and fashion, everything changed faster than it ever had before. We went drinking in obscure backdoor bars, since in 1920 the noble experiment had begun. What a laugh! Booze was everywhere, and everybody in the city had something to celebrate. We girls adopted a complete new style of clothing. That didn't sit too well with my mother, even though she'd been so progressive in her day. I guess things were changing just too fast for her. It didn't bother me too much. I was completely independent, unmarried, and self-sufficient. I'd been able to keep my job at the council, and there was no short supply of eligible bachelors who had returned from the war. Everything was carefree again. There were no worries at all. I have heard it said that the stock market follows the height of ladies' skirts, and it's been my observation that may very well be true. In the 20s, the skirts went up and up and up, and so did the stock exchange. In September 1929, fashion king Jean Patel launched his new autumn show in Paris, featuring his line of designs, which consisted of ground-dusting, long, slender dresses. The fashionable spectators at the show grew uneasy and embarrassed, trying in vain to pull their dresses down to cover their knees. Almost immediately, day dresses dropped to below the calf, and evening wear reached the ground, as did Wall Street, crashing a month later on the now infamous 24th of October, 1929. The stock market crash led to the worst economic depression ever imaginable. But even during the darkest times, there is always fashion. Our long, slender, boyish looks were no longer appreciated as haute couture, and the dangerous curves became the height of fashion. Somewhat ironic, isn't it, that we starved ourselves to death to fit into those ridiculously narrow tunics in the prosperous 20s, and when we had little to eat, fashion called for big bosoms and wide hips. The toll of this crisis has been felt internationally. It has allowed extremists and fascists to get a solid foot on the ground in Europe, resulting in another war. I so hoped we would be able to stay out of this one. But yesterday President Roosevelt told us over the radio that the Japanese attacked our biggest naval base in the Pacific, Pearl Harbor. I fear this is going to be a long one.